Just your breasts, Chloe. Nothing else. Julian Thorne's voice was low and steady, like the engine of a luxury car, a sound devoid of emotion, yet carrying absolute weight. A moment, that's all I ask. In return, all this money will be yours. We were in the penthouse of the Mandarin Oriental Hotel overlooking Central Park, which glittered like a carpet of black diamonds under the Manhattan night sky. The air was thick with the smell of wealth, the scent of Italian leather, a hint of sandalwood, and the expensive single malt whiskey in his glass. The check lay on the glass table between us, a small piece of paper holding a number that made my head spin $2 million. My mind reeled trying to find a logical explanation. I had met all sorts of men in New York since moving from Ohio 3 years ago. The Wall Street brokers bursting with self-satisfaction, the newly rich tech programmers with their $1,000 sneakers, and the impoverished artists who considered their angst a form of currency. But Julian Thorne was different. He didn't fit into any of those categories. He belonged to another world, a world of quiet power, of generational wealth that didn't need to be flaunted. I had met him at a charity gala my best friend Maya, an art dealer, had dragged me to. Julian didn't mingle with the crowd. The crowd shifted around him. He had a commanding stillness, his steel-gray eyes observing everything and everyone with a cool detachment. When Maya introduced us, he merely gave a slight nod, but his gaze lingered on me a moment longer than necessary. Before the party ended, a small business card was discreetly pressed into my hand bearing only a phone number and a handwritten note. Tonight, Mandarin Oriental, Penthouse. And now here I was facing an offer that was as bizarre as it was unbelievable. $2 million. That money wouldn't just pay off my mountain of student debt. It would change my life. I could quit my boring financial analyst job, buy a condo in the West Village, instead of sharing a cramped apartment in Queens, and live the life I only dared to dream of while scrolling through Instagram. But the price, it was so strange. "You don't want anything else?" I asked, my voice trembling. In my head, I had prepared for the usual indecent proposals, but this wasn't one of them. "I have been very clear, Chloe," Julian replied, taking a sip of his whiskey. "I am not interested in a relationship, nor am I looking for companionship in the conventional sense. I simply want a moment to admire your assets, only your breasts, no touching, nothing more." The absurdity of it almost made me laugh. All I had to do was take off my shirt and let him look, and no intimacy, no sexual act, just a simple act of observation. Compared to what some girls in this city were willing to do for a fraction of that money, this request seemed almost harmless. It was odd, but harmless. At least that's what I told myself. Why? I couldn't help but ask. A fleeting smile touched Julian's lips, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Do you ask why the sun rises, or why the tide comes in? Some things simply are. I have particular tastes and the means to satisfy them. The only question you need to answer is whether you will accept my offer." I looked at the check, then at the city skyline outside. The bright neon lights beckoned, promising a world of glamour and luxury, a world I had always longed to belong to. I was so tired of counting every penny, of turning down invitations to go out because I couldn't afford it. I wanted more. "All right," I whispered, my voice firmer than I expected. "I agree." He nodded, not a flicker of surprise, as if he had known my answer all along. "Good." When he was satisfied, the moment passed in a clinical, detached manner. There was no seduction, only a strange, heavy silence. Immediately after, a notification pinged on my phone. A message from my bank. A massive sum had just been deposited into my account. $2 million. I almost choked. Was that all it took? I had hit the jackpot, I thought. That transaction between Julian and me was repeated 6 more times over the next 4 months. Each time was identical, a brief message summoning me to a luxury hotel. The offer made a huge sum of money transferred. He never spoke of himself, never asked about my life, never shared anything. As soon as he got what he wanted, he would politely ask me to leave. What bothered me was that Julian never wanted a real relationship. He was like a ghost in my life, an incredibly generous ghost. My bank account had swollen to an unbelievable size. With this sudden wealth, I plunged into a life of luxury. Designer clothes from famous fashion houses, a penthouse apartment with panoramic city views, exclusive parties at the most luxurious venues. Maya, my best friend, though a little envious, was incredibly impressed by my transformation, admiring the wealth I seemed to have acquired so easily. But then after our 7th meeting, Julian disappeared. Not a message, not a call, not a goodbye. He vanished as if he had never existed. At first I was confused, a little annoyed, wondering if I had done something wrong. But as the days passed, I gradually forgot comforting myself with my new fortune. I had gotten what I wanted. So had he. Perhaps our arrangement had simply come to an end. I thought that strange chapter was closed, that I could continue enjoying my new life without a care. But I was wrong. Hell was just beginning. Life without Julian was the same as life with him, except for the sudden late-night summonses and massive deposits. But I didn't need them anymore. I was rich. Truly rich. New York, the city that had once been a concrete monster threatening to devour me with bills and exorbitant rent, was now my playground. I quit my Wall Street job without a second glance, leaving behind the spreadsheets and smug bald bosses. The Queen's apartment was replaced by a glass penthouse in Tribeca, where I could watch the Hudson River sparkle every morning while sipping espresso from a $5,000 coffee machine. My wardrobe was crammed with Balenciaga dresses, Louboutin shoes, and handbags I had previously only dared to gaze at through the shop windows on Fifth Avenue. Maya was both astonished and worried. "Chloe, all of this, where did it come from?" she asked one afternoon, as we sat by the rooftop pool at Soho House, expensive cocktails sweating in the summer sun. "He's an investor," I lied smoothly. "A very private one. He saw potential in me, invested in a few of my ideas, and they paid off." It was a weak explanation, but Maya accepted it, perhaps because she wanted to believe it. She was happy for me, but sometimes I caught her looking at me with an inscrutable expression, as if she were trying to solve a puzzle where the pieces didn't quite fit. Life was an endless series of parties, weekend trips to the Hamptons, and shopping sprees without looking at the price tags. I had become the exact person I had always aspired to be, an independent, wealthy, and admired woman. I thought I had cheated the system, found a shortcut to happiness without paying any price. The first sign that something was wrong came unexpectedly and innocuously. I went to visit an old college friend, Sarah, who had just had her first child, an adorable baby girl named Lily. Their apartment in Park Slope, Brooklyn, was filled with sunshine and the sound of a baby's laughter. But as soon as I walked in and smiled at the baby in her crib, Lily's tiny face scrunched up. She began to scream, a panicked, pained cry I had never heard from a child before. "Oh, she must just be tired," Sarah said quickly, picking her up. But Lily wouldn't stop. She cried even harder, her small eyes staring at me with sheer terror. Anyone else who came near her calmed her down a little, but if I took a single step closer, the wailing would start again. It was awkward and embarrassing. I ended up making an excuse and leaving early, Lily's cries echoing in my ears all the way home in the Uber. A few weeks later, I woke up one morning with a strange heaviness in my chest. It was accompanied by a sharp pain in my back between my shoulder blades. I assumed it was from sleeping in a bad position or overdoing it with my new personal trainer. Worried, I scheduled an appointment at one of the best hospitals in Manhattan. The doctors ran a series of tests, MRIs, blood work, ultrasounds, but they found nothing wrong. "You're perfectly healthy, Ms. Davis," an older doctor told me, his tone slightly condescending. "Perhaps you're under stress. Try yoga or take a vacation." They prescribed me some painkillers and advised me to rest. The pills seemed to work. A few days later, the pain disappeared, and I felt much better, quickly returning to my routine of work and parties. But then a few days after that, the real hell began. It started with an itch, a terrible itch on my chest. It wasn't a normal surface-level itch. It was deep, persistent, and drove me crazy. I scratched until my skin was red and bleeding, but that only made it worse. I went back to the hospital. More tests were done, but no diagnosis was made. The doctors were baffled. They couldn't understand what was happening. I saw numerous dermatologists and allergists, but the result was always the same. No explanation. They prescribed me creams and ointments to apply, but the more I applied, the worse it got. It felt like someone had rubbed hot cayenne pepper on my chest. The burning sensation lasted for days. Soon I noticed a more terrifying change. My breasts began to get heavier, larger, as if they were growing day by day. Not only that, but they were excruciatingly painful, as if they were being scalded with boiling water. My designer bras no longer fit. Even getting dressed became an ordeal every time fabric touched my chest. Maya came to visit me one day bringing soup and words of encouragement. At first she thought my illness was stress-related. But as my condition worsened, her mind started to drift back to the mysterious man I had only mentioned once, Julian. She recalled the strange nature of our relationship, how he had suddenly appeared in my life, taken what he wanted without ever caring for me as a person, and then disappeared without a trace. She realized that my rapid health decline had started right after Julian vanished. "Chloe," she said, her voice hesitant as she sat by my bed. I hadn't left the house in days. I know this sounds crazy, but I have to ask, have you ever thought this illness could be related to Julian? I frowned, the pain making me irritable. "What are you talking about, Maya?" Maya took a deep breath, avoiding my gaze before continuing. "I mean, you were living a great life, perfectly healthy. And then suddenly he disappears, and now you're suffering like this. It can't be a coincidence, Chloe." My eyes stared off into space. I seemed to be reliving my moments with Julian, the cold hotel rooms, his empty gaze, the emotionless transactions. I shook my head, trying to banish the thoughts. "No, Maya, you don't understand. He never hurt me. All he wanted, it wasn't a big deal. Just a little time with me." "But think about it, Chloe." Maya sighed, searching for the words. "He was so mysterious. He never talked about himself. He didn't care about you. He came, did what he had to do, and left. Don't you find that strange?" I turned away. A flicker of doubt crossed my face. "I just thought he wasn't into relationships, that he had his own preferences," I mumbled almost to myself. "You see, Chloe, we don't even know who that man is," Maya insisted. What if he took something from you every time you met? What if what he really wanted wasn't what you thought it was?" A heavy silence filled the room. I was absorbing my friend's words. Slowly I turned my head back to look at her, my eyes filled with fear. "You think he did something to me?" "I don't know, Chloe." Maya said, her voice gentle but firm. "But I know this world is full of strange things. There are people who know how to take more than they give, people who can drain your life force without you even realizing it." A pained groan escaped my lips. "I was so blind, Maya. All I wanted was the life I saw on TV. The clothes, the cars, the luxury. I didn't care where it came from. I didn't think I would have to pay a price, in this way." That price was now weighing on me, an unbearable weight, a pain that was eating me from the inside out. And for the first time since meeting Julian Thorne, a cold, terrifying truth began to creep into my mind. Perhaps he hadn't just bought my time. Perhaps he had bought a piece of my very soul. My condition didn't just worsen, it became a living nightmare. My breasts continued to grow to grotesque proportions. Soon each one was the size of a giant watermelon, taut and deformed. I could barely get out of bed. Standing upright without supporting them with my hands was impossible. My spine began to curve under the unbelievable weight, and every breath was a painful effort. Then one day, a terrible stench began to emanate from me. It was the smell of decaying flesh, a sweet, nauseating odor, as if I were rotting from the inside while still alive. The pain was indescribable. I cried every day for hours, deeply regretting what I had done for money. I thought about my family in Ohio. What would they think of me if they knew the truth? What would they think of the daughter who had sold a part of her body to a stranger in exchange for designer handbags and a penthouse apartment? I was born into a middle-class family, not wealthy, but never lacking. My parents had worked hard to give me a decent life, a house in the suburbs, a good education, and a lot of love. I grew up in a modest but warm home. But I, Chloe, wanted more. I dreamed of the glamour, charm, and affluence of New York. And if I had been a little more patient, if I had worked a little harder, I had seen countless doctors. No one understood what was wrong with me. Some flatly refused to see me, thinking I had a mental disorder or was seeking attention. One day, an old doctor, having exhausted all other options, suggested a solution I had never considered. "Ms. Davis," he said, his voice weary, "modern medicine doesn't seem to be able to help you. Perhaps you should try a different path. Alternative medicine. I know someone in the countryside." He gave me an address written on a prescription pad. It was an admission of defeat, a final act of desperation. With the help of Maya, who had become my only lifeline in this storm, we drove out of the city towards the rolling hills of the Hudson Valley. The healer we sought did not live in a bright office. He lived in a small wooden cabin hidden deep in a dense forest. His name was Elias Vance. He was an elderly man with clear eyes and a calmness that radiated from him. He looked at me in silence, a serious gaze, as if he were seeing through my diseased flesh deep into my soul. Maya, sitting beside me, held her breath, filled with hope and fear. Finally, Mr. Vance sighed, shaking his head, his face etched with sadness. "My child," his voice was deep and gentle, "you have crossed a line that even science cannot erase. You have entered into a covenant, an agreement that cannot be broken." Maya stared at him, stunned. She squeezed my hand tighter. A covenant. But she didn't sign anything. She just met a man who gave her money. Mr. Vance turned to me, his gaze piercing. "Tell me, child, who was this man, and what did he take from you each time you met?" I answered in a weak voice, my breath catching. He just wanted to look at my breasts. Nothing else. He never asked for anything more." The healer closed his eyes for a moment as if praying in silence. Then he declared in a voice heavy with truth, "By accepting this arrangement, you allowed this man, if he is indeed a man, to access something much deeper than your body. He has taken fragments of your soul, your life essence." Maya gasped. "What? But there must be some way to reverse this, a ritual, a prayer." The old man slowly shook his head. "No, child. This kind of covenant cannot be washed away with words. When one aligns with a spirit or someone who manipulates dark forces, the initial price is often invisible, but the final cost is always terrible. With each encounter, he took a piece of your life. And now he has all that he wanted. You traded your life for money, and the spirits do not forgive easily. The covenant is sealed, and it is irreversible. Your time on this earth is coming to an end." Those words hit me like a death sentence. The last shred of hope I had been clinging to dissolved into thin air. I wasn't just sick. I was cursed. My condition deteriorated so quickly that I could no longer do anything for myself. Maya did her best to help, but she had her own life, her own job and responsibilities. Finally, with no other choice, I called home. I didn't tell my parents the whole story. How could I? I just said I had a strange illness and the doctors in New York couldn't help. Without a moment's hesitation, they said, "Come home, sweetheart." When my father saw me at the airport, he stood frozen, speechless. His tall, strong frame seemed to shrink before my eyes. My mother burst into tears. "Chloe, my baby girl, what happened to you?" she whispered, her voice breaking. My father, a strong man who had always been proud of his children, came closer, his voice trembling. "We gave you everything. We worked ourselves to the bone so you would want for nothing, so you could have a good life. Wasn't that enough?" He clenched his fists, a mixture of anger and anguish. Don't you know, Chloe? There are no shortcuts in life. What seems easy often comes at a higher price than we can imagine. That night in my childhood bedroom, surrounded by old band posters and high school yearbooks, I told them everything, every humiliating detail. Julian, the money, the deal. But what kind of person does something like that? My mother cried. And you accepted it, just for money. Desperate but determined, my parents. After hearing about a spiritual healer living in a remote rural area, gathered their last resources and strength to take me there. They clung to a sliver of hope that this man known for his wisdom and gifts could save their daughter. This healer, a Native American man, living on a reservation, spoke in a low, calm voice. I understand why you have come. This young woman has walked a dangerous path, and the spirit attached to that path is powerful and unforgiving. My mother trembled, squeezing my hand. Please help us. We've tried everything. We're willing to pay any price offer, any sacrifice to save our daughter. The healer sighed, looking at me seriously. You may not understand the cost of such a request. What has been taken from this child is not easily returned. She is bound by a covenant made in ignorance but sealed in the spirit world. My father spoke up. There must be something you can do. I beg you, she's our only daughter. She made a mistake, but she deserves a second chance. The healer thought for a moment, then motioned for us to follow him into a ceremonial tent. He asked me to sit in the center of a circle drawn on the ground. Once I was settled, he began to chant in an ancient language, calling upon the ancestral spirits, seeking guidance and revelation about my condition. A tense silence stretched on, until the old man finally spoke. I have seen the spirit that possesses her. It is a spirit of greed, a creature of darkness that feeds on those who seek wealth without understanding the true cost. These spirits are cunning. They never easily release their prey. To break this bond, he continued, deep rituals must be performed, and even then, there are no guarantees. These spirits do not give up what they believe is theirs. He began a powerful ceremony, making small cuts on my back, face, hands, and legs, with an obsidian knife, then rubbing a pungent-smelling herb into the wounds. He chanted, calling on the spirits to fight against the dark forces clinging to me. Hours passed. I screamed in agony, feeling as if a heavy dark force was being pulled from my chest, as if my soul were being torn apart and purified at the same time. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the exhausted old man collapsed. A sacred silence filled the tent. He looked at me and said, "The spirit has left. But remember, Chloe, it will watch you from a distance. It will wait for the slightest sign of weakness, the smallest trace of greed. You must now live a life of humility and renunciation. If you stray from this path, it will return." My parents cried with relief. They thanked the healer profusely and took me home. I began to regain my strength. Or at least, that's what we believed. The relief was temporary, a brief lull in the storm. The healer had said that my body needed time to recover, that the physical damage would take longer to heal than the invisible scars on my soul. My parents clung to that statement like a life raft. They cared for me, cooked nutritious meals, and filled the house with a hopeful silence. For the first week, there seemed to be a change. The foul odor lessened, and the constant sharp pain in my chest subsided to a dull ache. But my breasts didn't get any smaller. They remained a grotesque burden, a physical reminder of my pact. Still, we hoped. But a week later, I relapsed. The pain returned with a tenfold ferocity, as if the dark spirit were punishing me for daring to expel it. The weight of my breasts became unbearable, crushing my ribs and making it difficult to breathe. The stench returned stronger than ever, clinging to everything in the house, the curtains, the carpets, the clothes. It was the smell of failure, the smell of approaching death. My parents were devastated. They couldn't bear to see me in so much pain anymore. Even the neighbors who had known me since I was a little girl began to complain about the smell. Some brought folk remedies, herbal teas, holy oils. Nothing worked. Our home, once a sanctuary, had become a prison of despair. Then something strange happened. Not far from my parents' house was a small, old red brick church, the one my family had attended intermittently when I was a child. I noticed that whenever the church held prayer services on Wednesday evenings and Friday night vigils, my pain seemed to lessen. It didn't disappear completely, but its intensity decreased as if some invisible force were pushing back the darkness that was consuming me. At first I thought it was just a coincidence, but it happened again and again. The sound of the hymns, the congregation's unified prayers drifting through the open windows, seemed to create a thin but real barrier between me and my suffering. In desperation, I begged my parents to take me there. "Please," I sobbed. "I have to go. I think there might be help there." And so on a humid Friday evening, my father, his face etched with exhaustion, helped me into the church. We sat in the back pew, trying to be inconspicuous, but there was no hiding my condition. People turned to look, whispers spreading quickly through the pews. The pastor, a man named Father Michael, approached us after the service. He had a kind face and his eyes held compassion, not morbid curiosity. "Sir, ma'am," he said to my parents, "I see your daughter has been through a terrible ordeal. It's clear she is being tormented by forces beyond the physical. Please let her stay here in God's care." He continued, his voice gentle but firm. "We will pray for her and seek her deliverance." My father hesitated, looking at me with worried eyes. He was a practical man, one who believed in what he could see and touch. "Father, do you really believe that God can heal her?" "We've seen doctors, healers, everyone we could think of. Nothing has worked." Father Michael nodded with a deep calm. "God's power is greater than any affliction. When man and medicine fail, only He can restore. But this will require prayer, faith, and dedication. Chloe will have to stay here immersed in an environment of constant prayer." "Dad, please," I pleaded, my voice weak. "Let me stay. I believe this is my last chance." My father let out a long, heavy sigh, then nodded. "All right, Chloe. I entrust you to God's hands." Days turned into weeks. I stayed at the church, living in a small room in the back. I was surrounded by the ceaseless prayers of the congregation and the tender care of its members. Every Friday night the church held all-night prayer vigils. The faithful sang, cried out to heaven, and implored God for my deliverance. Their devotion was so intense it seemed to be pushing back the darkness itself. On one of those Friday nights, as the prayers reached a crescendo, I suddenly felt an intense heat surge through me. I screamed, clutching my chest, and collapsed to the floor, convulsing as if something was being torn from me. Father Michael, sensing the moment had come, laid his hands on me. "In the name of Jesus, I command every dark force to leave this body now." I gasped, my eyes wide, as I felt the last remnants of pain leave my body. An immense weight lifted, replaced by a profound peace I hadn't felt in months. Lying on the floor, exhausted but free, I looked up at Father Michael, tears streaming down my face. Thank you. I feel free." Father Michael helped me to my feet, a gentle smile on his face. "Thank God, my child. It is His grace and mercy that have delivered you. Remember this day, engrave it upon your heart. Walk in faith from now on with humility, and let God guide your steps." My healing was miraculous. First the smell disappeared. Then slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, my breasts began to shrink. The open sores, the painful stretch marks started to close. My body, once weak and deformed, regained its strength, its light, its life. When my parents came to visit, they found me completely changed, lighter, stronger, as if a veil of darkness had finally been lifted. They held me for a long time, sobbing, thanking God for the miracle they had just witnessed. My life, which had been bartered and nearly lost, had been given back to me. But I knew it was no longer my own. I had been saved for a purpose, and I would spend the rest of my days living worthy of that second gift. Life after the miracle was not a return to my old self. That person, the Chloe who yearned for glass skyscrapers and red-soled shoes, had died on the cold church floor that night. The one who was resurrected was someone different, someone shaped by pain and saved by grace. My physical recovery was slow but steady. As the weeks passed, my body gradually returned to normal, but not exactly as it was before. Faint scars remained on my skin, silvery lines where the skin had been stretched beyond its limits. They were not ugly to me. They were reminders maps of my journey. They were the marks of the price I had paid and the mercy I had received. I did not go back to New York. That city with its glittering promises now felt like a memory of a fever dream. The money left in my bank account, still a staggering amount, felt dirty, tainted by its origin. With Father Michael's help, I donated it all, dividing it among charities, homeless shelters, and community outreach programs run by the church. As I signed the last check, a feeling of lightness washed over me. The final burden of the pact had been lifted. I stayed in my small Ohio town, moving back in with my parents. It was a little awkward at first, a woman in her late 20s returning to her childhood bedroom. But the shame was quickly replaced by gratitude. We healed together. They had seen the worst of me, and their love had never wavered. Our relationship, once strained by my secret aspirations, was mended stronger than ever. I started volunteering at the church. At first, it was simple tasks, organizing hymnals, cleaning up after services, helping in the soup kitchen. But gradually, Father Michael saw something in me. He saw that my story was not a source of shame to be hidden, but a powerful testimony. He encouraged me to share it. The first time I stood before the congregation, my heart pounded, my voice trembled. I didn't go into the lurid details about Julian or the bizarre nature of our pact. Instead, I spoke of the emptiness that had driven me, the greed that had blinded me, and the desperation that had brought me to the brink of destruction. I spoke of chasing the wrong things, money status, the admiration of others, and the true cost it had exacted from me. And then I spoke of deliverance. I spoke of finding hope in the lowest of places, of the power of faith and community. When I finished, a silence fell over the church. Then one person began to clap, then another. Soon the whole congregation was on its feet. Many were in tears. After the service, people came up to me, not with curiosity, but with their own stories of quiet battles, temptations, and longings. I realized that my story, as strange as it was, held a universal truth. We are all at risk of trading our souls for the glittering, worthless things of the world. My life found a new purpose. I didn't become a preacher, but I became a listener, a sharer. I worked with the young people in our community. Those on the cusp of adulthood, their eyes bright with the promises of a material world. I told them my story, not to frighten them, but to warn them, to show them that the easiest path is rarely the right one. I never heard from Julian Thorne again. Sometimes late at night, I would wonder who or what he was. Was he a man with bizarre and malevolent desires? Or was he something else, something older, wearing a human shell to prey on aspiring souls I would never know? And I was okay with that. He was a chapter in my life, a dark and painful one, but a chapter that was closed. He had no more power over me. One autumn afternoon, several years later, I was walking in the town park when I ran into Maya. She was visiting family and had heard I was back. We sat on a bench watching the leaves fall. "I'm so glad to see you like this, Chloe," she said, her voice sincere. "At peace." "I am," I replied, and I meant it. "Thank you, Maya, for not giving up on me." "Never," she said, taking my hand. "But I have to ask, do you ever regret it?" I thought for a moment. I regret my blindness. I regret the pain I caused myself and my family. But regretting the whole thing, no. It sounds crazy, but without it, I never would have found this. I gestured around me. The quiet little town, the clean air, the peace in my own soul. I had to go to hell to realize that everything I ever really wanted was here all along. My life now is simple. It doesn't have exclusive parties or designer clothes. But it has meaning. It has love. It has purpose. Sometimes the things we chase most desperately are the very things that destroy us. Wealth and luxury are nothing if they cost us our soul. I learned that lesson the hard way, And now every day I try to live a life that is a thank you for the second chance I was given, a life built not on what I own but on who I have become. A survivor, a witness, a woman who bears the scars of grace.